In the lush suburbs of Lagos, where opulence and influence reign, lived the Ikena family, a household known not just for their affluence but for the mystery that always cloaked their estate. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the name Yuzo Ikena, the young billionaire tech mogul who had conquered Africa's startup world before the age of 35. Women adored him. Magazines chased his interviews. But behind the fame, there was something missing in Yuzo's life, something his wealth could not buy. His mother, Mama Ikena, knew what it was. After her husband's death, Mama Ikena had poured her soul into raising Yuzo with values rooted in humility, kindness, and discernment. But the moment he became rich, Mama Ikena began to fear what many African mothers feared, that money would blind her son to true love and attract only opportunists with masks made of smiles and intentions woven with deceit. So one day, without Yuzo's knowledge, Mama Ikena packed a small bag, wrapped herself in a faded Ankara wrapper, tied her head in a dull scarf, and walked into her son's company, not as his mother, but as a cleaner named Mama Nkechi. Mama Nkechi was hired without fuss. No one paid attention to an elderly woman mopping floors or scrubbing bathrooms. She was given the night shift in the lower office blocks where interns and assistants worked late. But that's exactly where she wanted to be. For 3 weeks, she cleaned in silence, her eyes studying the women who passed her without notice. Most of them walked past her like she was part of the furniture. Some tossed empty takeout boxes on the floor for her to pick up. A few even whispered insults, calling her slow, smelly, or irrelevant. But one girl caught her attention. Her name was F. F was a junior data analyst, humble, quiet, and often the last to leave the office. Unlike the others, F greeted Mama Nkechi every evening. She'd bring her food wrapped in foil, ask about her health, and even offer to help her carry the mop bucket up the stairs. The other staff often mocked her for talking to a cleaner. But she didn't care. One night, Mama Nkechi asked her, "My daughter, why do you treat me so kindly?" F looked confused. "Because you're human," she said simply. "My late mother was a cleaner too. She worked till her back broke to send me to school. I see her in you." Those words cracked something open in Mama Nkechi's chest. F didn't know that the woman she was talking to wasn't just a cleaner, but the mother of the CEO whose name was etched in gold on the glass doors of the skyscraper. But F's compassion wasn't the only thing that intrigued Mama Nkechi. F's integrity was rare. One evening, Mama Nkechi overheard a conversation between 2 female staff who were scheming to seduce Yuzo. They laughed about how one of them had paid a herbalist to tie Yuzo spiritually. Another bragged about faking a master's degree to impress him. But F stayed far away from those circles. She avoided office gossip, never sought favors, and didn't wear flashy clothes or makeup. She didn't even know what Yuzo looked like in person. "Why don't you attend the CEO's events?" Mama Nkechi once asked her. "I came to work, not to chase shadows," F replied. The next morning, Mama Nkechi made a decision. She would introduce F to her son. But how? Yuzo had become jaded over the years. He often complained that women only loved the billionaire version of him, not the boy who once sold eggs in the village with his father. Getting him to meet F in a natural, unforced way would require a plan. And Mama Nkechi had one. The next Sunday, she returned to her real identity, elegant wrapper, jewelry shining, chauffeur waiting. She called her son. "Yuzo, I want you to accompany me to a friend's church next weekend," she said. Yuzo groaned. "Mama, not another matchmaking scheme." "No matchmaking," she lied. "Just escort me. I want to thank God with a friend." Reluctantly, Yuzo agreed. That Sunday, Mama Nkechi wore white lace and stepped into the humble Anglican church where F worshipped. As expected, F was there, singing in the choir, face glowing with simplicity. Mama Nkechi had already spoken to the pastor, requesting he acknowledge F's dedication publicly. During the service, the pastor said, "Let's thank Sister F, who despite her job pressure, has never missed choir practice. She's a light among us." Yuzo glanced at her, intrigued. After the service, Mom and Kechi intentionally left her phone behind in a pew. As they turned to leave, she gasped, "My phone." F, watching from afar, dashed over, found it under the bench, and ran to give it back. Yuzo took the phone from her hands and for a second, their eyes met. It wasn't love at first sight. But it was something calm, respectful, real. "Thank you," he said, noticing her plain shoes and soft hands. "You're welcome, sir," she replied and hurried off, not recognizing who he was. Mom and Kechi smiled. The seed had been planted. Over the next few weeks, she orchestrated more coincidences, bumping into F in a bookstore and asking Yuzo to pick her up from the market where F happened to shop. Every time, Yuzo grew more curious about the girl who didn't try to impress him. At work, he began asking discreetly about her. "She's boring," one colleague said. "She's too quiet," another added. But Yuzo noticed something no one else did: her consistency, her principles, her refusal to compromise even when no one was watching. Then, one evening, while reviewing old footage from security cameras in the building, as part of an internal audit, he saw something that shook him. It was F helping the old cleaner, Mom and Kechi, carry a mop bucket upstairs, weeks ago. His mother. In disguise. Yuzo stood frozen. The pieces fell into place. His mother had pretended to be a cleaner. She had infiltrated his company like a spy. And this girl was the one person who treated her with dignity. He confronted Mama Ikena the next day. "Mama, why?" "Because I needed to see who would treat me like a human being when they thought I was a nobody," she said calmly. "And I found her." Yuzo sat in silence. He had never felt smaller, or prouder. For days, Yuzo couldn't get the footage out of his mind. He rewatched it over and over, F lifting that heavy mop bucket, brushing sweat from her forehead, and laughing with Mom and Kechi like she was her own mother. There was no performance, no pretense, just kindness. That night, Yuzo stood alone on the rooftop of his skyscraper, overlooking the city lights of Lagos. All his life, he had been surrounded by women who wanted the spotlight beside him. But F? She didn't even know she was standing in the spotlight of his mother's hidden camera. The next morning, Yuzo dressed down, no suit, no security entourage. Just jeans, a cap, and a quiet smile. He took the back elevator to the analyst floor and waited. When F arrived, she almost didn't recognize him. He approached her gently. "Can we talk?" he asked. She blinked. Sure. "But, are you?" "Yes," he nodded. "I'm Yuzo Ikena." She stepped back slightly, startled. "I know this is strange," he continued. "But I've seen something rare in you: humility, compassion. You treated a cleaner like she was royalty." I didn't know who she was," F stammered. "That's the point," he said. They sat in the break room, and Yuzo told her everything. How his mother had pretended to be a cleaner. How she had watched the staff closely. How F was the only one who passed the test, not by pretending, but by being her true self. F was silent, her face pale. "I didn't expect all this," she finally said. "I didn't do anything special. You were yourself. And that is rare." He stood up and handed her a brown envelope. "There's a formal invitation to dinner with my mother. No strings attached. But she'd love to see you, this time, as herself." That evening, F sat in front of her tiny mirror, heart pounding. She wore a modest dress, the same one she'd worn to her university graduation. No makeup, just lip balm and faith. The Ikena mansion was intimidating. Gold gates, marble floors, chandeliers like glass waterfalls. But Mama Ikena welcomed her with open arms, dressed in elegant lace but eyes warm as a village auntie. "My daughter," she said, "tonight, we break bread, not as boss and employee, not as rich and poor, but as women who understand the meaning of dignity." F blinked back tears. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. She felt chosen. Not for her body, her looks, or her clothes, but for her heart. And in the soft candlelight of the Ikena dining room, the seed that Mama Nkechi planted began to bloom. The days that followed were unlike anything F had ever experienced. For the first time in her adult life, she was being courted, not with expensive jewelry or showy promises, but with honesty and gentle intent. Yuzo called her, not to impress, but to listen. He invited her to quiet cafes, not red carpet events. And with each conversation, F felt something unfamiliar but genuine blossom, a cautious but steady trust. Still, F wrestled with questions in the quiet of her room. Why me? What if this is all temporary? What if it's another test? But each time she met Mama Ikena, her fears softened. The older woman would call randomly just to check on her. Once, she brought soup when F had the flu. Another time, she insisted they pray together at dawn, sitting on the veranda like two village women watching the sunrise over Lagos. You remind me of myself, Mama Ikena said one morning. I had nothing when I met Yuzo's father. But love builds what money cannot buy. F smiled. Do you really think I'm good enough for him? Mama Ikena reached over and held her hand. My dear, you're not good enough, you are right. There's a difference. Many women are good. But only a few are right for the journey. Word of Yuzo's mystery girl began to leak into the office. Rumors swirled. Some colleagues mocked F behind her back, others warned her that rich men never marry women from the bottom floor. But Yuzo didn't hide her. He walked into the office one afternoon, took her hand in front of everyone, and said, "This is F. She is the most important person in this building to me. And if anyone disrespects her, they disrespect me." The room went silent. Some clapped awkwardly. Others stared in disbelief. But for F, that moment was the turning point. Not because she was suddenly validated, but because she finally saw the kind of man Yuzo really was. Not just rich, but brave. Not just powerful, but principled. 6 months later, the Ikena estate buzzed with quiet preparation. It wasn't the typical extravagant wedding everyone expected from a billionaire. There were no celebrity designers, no helicopters circling the skies, no red carpet rolled down the driveway. Just close family, old friends, and the warm scent of jollof rice and fried plantain floating from the backyard. F stood in front of a small mirror inside the family home. Her dress was handmade by a seamstress in her neighborhood. Modest, cream-colored, with lace patterns that reminded her of her late mother's church gown. She wasn't the most beautiful bride in Lagos that day. But she felt the most blessed. As she stepped out, she saw Mama Ikena waiting by the door, her eyes glistening with tears. You came into our lives like a whisper, Mama said. But you've changed everything. F knelt respectfully before her. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Yuzo stood at the altar beneath a palm arch, looking not like a billionaire, but like a man who had finally found his peace. As the ceremony began, whispers rippled through the crowd. That's the girl who used to take the bus to work. Can you believe she was just an analyst? This must be some kind of spell. But Mama Ikena didn't flinch. She stood and faced the guests. I see some of you are confused, she said with grace, so let me clarify. I once disguised myself as a cleaner to see how people would treat me when I had nothing to offer them. Most looked through me like I didn't exist. Only one person offered kindness without knowing who I was. That person is now my daughter-in-law. Gasps filled the room. But she continued. This marriage is not built on money. It is built on truth. If you cannot see the beauty in that, perhaps you are not as rich as you think. The silence that followed was heavy, but respectful. That night, as the couple shared their first dance under a string of lanterns, F looked up at Yuzo and whispered, Are you sure you want this quiet life? He smiled. I've had the noisy one. It left me empty. Then he looked at her hand, small, calloused from years of struggle. This, he said, is real. This is what I want. Months later, F returned to her old office, not as an employee, but as a speaker for the company's mentorship program. She stood before interns, many of whom looked at her like a fairy tale. She smiled gently. Let me tell you something, she began. The world teaches you to chase what shines. But real value often hides in places no one looks, in an old cleaner, in a small cubicle, in the quiet way you treat those who cannot repay you. Life will test your heart before it rewards your hands. She paused. Pass that test.